Were you telling a story about running a Bucky before Bucky joins us?
I was. So apparently Bucky and I live near each other because on the bike path where I was walking.
Hold on a second. He's on hold right now. Is Bucky, you there? Bucky, before the radio audience.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Tell your story now that Bucky's
a
on.
couple of weeks ago, I think it was a Saturday morning, Sarah and I were walking with Cage, and I see Bucky approaching us on the bike path just out of nowhere. And I was just kind of, I did one of those things where your inner monologue comes out, and I was like, oh, hey, what's up, Bucky? And I had a hoodie on and sunglasses, so there's no possible way he would have known it was me, because he had just come in studio the week before.
Yes, and
he gave me one of those like, oh, hey, man, like the kind of like, why are you talking to me, crazy person on the bike path?
Is this an accurate portrayal, Bucky, of what happened?
Okay, so here's what happened, because he is in the neighborhood.
Okay.
It was an early morning walk.
Okay.
I was kind of rolling through. I think I had a podcast on that I'm listening to.
Okay.
And he is with the baby in tow, like full baby mode, everything.
Yep.
And he looks up as he's in, like, the baby carriage. And it's like, hey, Bucky. And I'm like, okay, what's up? But I didn't know what it is. But he's in full baby mode. So, like, I don't expect the guy to come from having formula or whatever he had in his hand. He's looking up and saying, hey, what's up?
Okay.
But like Cage was on his bike, and he was like being a lunatic, and then all of a sudden I see Bucky, and I know him, and I was like, oh, hey, what's up, Bucky? And he just gave me he definitely had his ear pods in, and he was just kind of like, oh, what's up, bro? And I'm like, and I looked at Sarah afterward, and I go, I totally just freaked out. But
it didn't work.
It did not land.
No, you're just you're sociable. You're trying to be sociable.
Just trying to be.
Well done, Bucky.
Cool. It was cool. Okay. Full disclosure.
Yes, sir.
Full disclosure.
Yes, Bucky.
I didn't know who was speaking to me.
Exactly.
I was like, okay.
I knew it.
Random family guy. Okay, cool. All right.
Bucky Brooks here on the Rich Eisen Show.
It was me.
My colleague from the NFL Media Group, as the radio audience rejoins us, just told a story about how Brockman freaked him out the other day when they were just crossing bike paths in the neighborhood. All right, Bucky, let's just jump right into it. 8 days before the draft. I don't know if mock drafts are recent or how recent they are, but we have your 3.0. You got C.J. Stroud to the Carolina Panthers, and it seems that the general consensus you're seeing, and I know, again, we're NFL Media Group people, so the words betting and markets don't usually get thrown together, but Bryce Young seems to be rocketing up a lot of people's boards to be number one overall, despite what we've been hearing about C.J. Stroud between about a week ago all the way back to the pro days. What do you got for me on this front, Bucky?
Okay, so here's what I got. Let's take that little mock draft that's in front of you. Let's rip that up.
Okay.
Let's rip that up, because what everyone is going to have to do is they're going to have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable stuff that's going to happen next weekend.
Okay.
This draft is the most volatile draft that we've ever seen.
Love it.
There are only 15 blue-chip players in this draft. So because of that, what we think we know, we have no idea. The only thing that I can tell you for certain is that Bryce Young is more than likely positively going to be the number one overall pick with the Carolina Panthers. He appears to be their guy. Like, they're all in on him. You heard Scott Fitterer's presser where he was talking about Bryce Young and Russell Wilson and those things. It appears they're very comfortable with him being the franchise quarterback. I think the drama comes after that. What are the Houston Texans going to do at 2? Like our guy Lance Zierlein had this a couple of weeks ago where he talked about, I don't think the Texans may take a quarterback at 2. They may be in love with Tyree Wilson, the defensive end. And so I can't claim that. Lance claimed that he's plugged into Houston, and the last couple of weeks we're beginning to hear more of that conversation. So if the Texans don't take a quarterback at 2, we know the Cardinals aren't going to take one at 3. So now you have the Indianapolis Colts at 4, which what seems to be, a dream scenario. They're going to be able to get the guy that we all presume would be C.J. Stroud at 4 to be their franchise quarterback. But there might be a curveball that comes at that spot.
Yeah.
What if the Indianapolis Colts like Will Levis more than C.J. Stroud? And what if they hand the card in and it's the Kentucky quarterback, not the Ohio State Buckeye, that comes off the board as the second quarterback? Now you have chaos because C.J. Stroud is available at 5 for the Seahawks. You have the Raiders at 7. And so what I'm saying is on Thursday, people need to get ready and have your popcorn ready because it's going to be absolutely bananas.
Absolutely bananas if that scenario, which, by the way, is entirely possible, does in fact play out. And that makes sense why Atlanta down at 8 would have C.J. Stroud in today, because not to say that he drops all the way down to 8, but if he drops to 5 or even 6, that is hailing distance for sure for somebody like Atlanta to go trade up and scrap whatever plans they might have currently for Desmond Ridder. But let's just go back to 2 for a second. Why would the Texans pass on a quarterback second overall, do you think, Bucky?
A few different things that could be in play at this situation, right? When you look at the Houston Texans and you understand people that come out of the Shanahan system in San Francisco, as much as we adore quarterbacks, there's some of those guys that feel like they're kind of the kingmaker when it comes to the quarterback. That, hey, the system is going to do everything for the quarterback. We just need to have a guy that can kind of manage the situation. We're going to surround him with the talent, and it will work. And coming off the heels of Brock Purdy, a 7th-round pick, Mr. Irrelevant, leading them to the championship game, they may be even more emboldened that the system makes the player more than the player makes the system. So that could lead them to say, well, let's recreate what we had in San Francisco. We had a dominant offensive line. We're going to take blue-chip players all around it, and eventually we'll plug in the quarterback and make it happen. And so it might be a situation where they may not value the quarterback situation like we do. They may see it as a part of the wheel, not the key cog in the wheel when it comes to making the team pop.
Is it possible, Bucky Brooks, my colleague from NFL Network and the NFL Media Group and co-host of the Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah, is it possible, sir, that we can connect that dot that you just put out there with the dot that Ian Rappaport put out there today, that the Niners are fielding calls for Trey Lance? Could it be possible the Texans are one of them? What do you think of that? And that's why they're not interested in that second overall pick at quarterback.
I mean,
Your
that's
thoughts?
very interesting, and that certainly could be a possibility, because here's what you normally would like, right? You normally, when you leave a situation, meaning I go from San Francisco to Houston, you tend to have an affinity for the players that you were just around in San Francisco. The fact that they were in a championship game, the fact that you felt like that team is viewed as one of the best rosters in football, you're more likely to pluck from them because there's a level of familiarity and comfort with them. And so if you are D'Amico Ryan and you're looking at a situation like, hey, you know what? If I'm going to do all of this stuff with everybody else, why not take a quarterback that already knows what we're doing? No, he hasn't played enough for us to really know what he is, but at least he knows the language and the system. Maybe we drop him in that situation and we have an experienced, I mean, relatively speaking, an experienced player take over, and maybe we start at step 3 as opposed to starting at step 1. Might have something to do with it.
Bucky Brooks here on the Rich Eisen Show. Okay, you mentioned Tyree Wilson could be the choice of the Texans, not Will Anderson, and Jalen Carter, who appeared on Real Sports talking about his situation earlier this week. It might be Tyree Wilson. I got him calling in 29 minutes from now, Bucky. Why could he be maybe the first defensive player off the board? Suss out that for me from your evaluating perspective, please.
Okay, so the interesting thing when you do the Tyree Wilson versus Will Anderson debate, everything should lead you to believe that Will Anderson will be the pick. When you look at sack production, which translates to the National Football League, I mean, well, Will Anderson has 34.5 sacks compared to Tyree Wilson's 17 sacks over the course of their career. Will Anderson has 62 tackles for loss, has been a disruptive player, playing for arguably the greatest coach that we've seen in the college game, and so he's well-schooled when it comes to that. But what happens in meetings when you talk enough and you're looking at the same names, sometimes there's this thing where you talk about upside and potential that kind of lures you to believe that Tyree Wilson has a longer wingspan. Tyree Wilson has what appears to be made more juice, first-step quickness. Maybe, just maybe, if we take him where he is, add a little coaching, maybe he can be a more dominant player than Will Anderson. That could certainly be in play in Houston, where I won't call them maybe overthinking the situation, but maybe they feel so confident in their coach that they feel like they can get more out of Tyree Wilson than they can from Will Anderson.
What's your evaluation of Jalen Carter as we sit here 8 days before the draft, Bucky?
Okay, Jalen Carter is really interesting. I mean, if you ask anybody, he is the most talented defender in the draft. His talent popped last year when they had that dominant defensive line with Jordan Davis, and then you think about the front where they had Nakobe Dean. He's the one that you couldn't take your eyes off of. However, what happens, Rich, when we talk about like a top 5 pick, we now begin to kind of dig a little deeper. So now you have the incident in January, which is, look, it's tragic in itself, and he certainly has to deal with that. And so you wonder how much that's going to continue to affect him. But then you begin to think about, hey, does he play hard all the time? He might be the most talented, but how often are we going to see that talent play at max potential? Then you dig deeper and try and figure out, is the football character what we want from a work ethic, show up, first one in, last one out perspective? Is he going to do all those things? And so when you have kind of all this cloud, this great stuff around you, it can make you talk yourself out of Jalen Carter despite the talent. And then when he cut off the visit, saying I'm not going to visit anybody outside the top 10, what he did is he kind of took that insurance net, that safety net away from him because he hasn't talked to everybody. If you have real questions about Jalen Carter and you haven't sat down and visited with him and looked him in his eye and become more comfortable with the person, he could slide, and he could slide because you're just not comfortable with taking him based on some of the baggage that might come with him.
Bucky Brooks here on the Rich Eisen Show. You started this conversation by saying there are 15 blue chip prospects in the draft. Just for those out there listening, viewing, is that average? Is that below average, above average? What do you got for me there?
So years ago, learned this from Ron Wolf, Hall of Fame executive. He says in every first round, there's typically 18 to 24 guys that are consensus first-round talent. Mm-hmm. Like no matter where you go, any draft board, those guys are going to be above the line when it comes to first-round players. This year's draft has 15, so that's significantly lower than what we're used to seeing. That said, there are a lot of guys from that 15 to 45 mark that are really good players. But beauty is always in the eye of the beholder. And so when you have that big variance, like 15 to 45, you're going to have some guys that are near the 45 spectrum that end up being mid-first-round picks and vice versa. And because every draft board is like a snowflake, when we get into the draft next Thursday, it's going to be different than what many of us expect because everyone values these guys differently, and there's a big separation between the blue chippers and everybody else. So once we get done with the blue chippers, it's going to be a little chaotic because no one knows how all these other teams view the same player. And so that's going to make it a little different than some of the mock drafts that we've seen from media guys on the outside.
So I know you don't have a crystal ball, Bucky. That is one of my favorite coaching cliches. No one has a crystal ball in the NFL. I actually do have one here on the set, but it's so damn big I don't take it out of the box. So what I'll ask you what's more likely, which is a game we play around here. What is more likely that we get 4 quarterbacks in the top 10 or Hendon Hooker isn't the last quarterback taken in the first round? What do you got for me?
I say it's more likely Hendon Hooker not being the last quarterback taken in the first round. The reason why I say that is because we do this, and we do this every year. We talk about the quarterbacks, and we have this fascination on the quarterbacks because, you know, Rich, on our side, quarterbacks sell. It makes everyone click in and tune in. But when you really grade these quarterbacks, I can't confidently say that these quarterbacks are top 10 talents. I would say Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, in whatever order you want to put them on, they are. But Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, that is a little too rich for me. And I think a lot of people don't view them as that. But it only takes one team to fall in love with you. And so that's why they are in that conversation. Hendon Hooker, though, when you compare Hendon Hooker to Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, they played in the same conference against the same competition. Hendon Hooker's numbers, I mean, they overwhelm Will Levis's numbers, and they definitely overwhelm Anthony Richardson's numbers against the same competition. At some point, it's about how well the player plays. Hendon Hooker outplayed both of those guys, which is why he is going to get more love than some people think. If not for the ACL injury, he would have a legitimate shot to be in that conversation.
Well, let's wave a wand for him and say he didn't blow out his knee. Where does he go before Stroud, do you think, in this draft?
No, I don't think he goes before Stroud, but to me, he's QB3 regardless.
Okay.
Injury or no injury. He is a better player than Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. Yeah, they may have more upside in tools, but in terms of how the game is played, Hendon Hooker outplays those guys by leaps and bounds. And so if you're asking me who should be the third quarterback to come off the board, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Hendon Hooker should be the third guy that we talk about. He is by far a better player than those other two guys. I would cast my lot with him over Will Levis or Anthony Richardson.
All right, so then let me ask you this last one then. We just mentioned those five guys at the quarterback. Obviously, Young and Stroud, and you think Hendon Hooker's 3, and then Will Levis, is he 4 and Richardson 5 in your books, or the other way around on that?
If I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, I'm a bank on Anthony Richardson because he's a more explosive and more dynamic athlete.
Okay.
So if I had to rank him 1 to 5, like Young, Stroud, Hooker, Anthony Richardson, then Will Levis. Now, will they come off the board like that? We got to tune in on Thursday to see how that works out.
Okay, and of those 5, give me the number, 1, 2, or 3. How many of the quarterbacks are left on the board when Bijan Robinson goes? What do you think?
Holy smoke.
What do you think? What do you think?
Man.
Give me a number. We won't hold you to it. We're not holding you to it. What do you think?
I would say 2 of those guys will still be on the board when Bijan Robinson goes off.
Mm-hmm. And your best guess who snags him? Philly at 10? Would they do something like that? What do you think?
I mean, how he wouldn't do it. If he wants to make their team unstoppable on a video game, he would do it. Because if you play Madden with Bijan Robinson behind Jalen Hurts, you couldn't stop him. I think keep an eye on the New England Patriots at 14. I think that's where it could start for him.
Okay.
The Chargers at 21. The Cowboys certainly could be in play in 26. But outside of the top 10, I'm thinking the Patriots would be a nice spot for him to kind of do some of that Corey Dillon stuff for them.
All right. And then in your evaluation of Will Levis, is it a red flag that he eats bananas with the peel on?
I mean, like, I can't take a guy seriously that's eating bananas whole, get a brown. Like, between that and look, it's one thing for you to have a stick, but it's another thing to have that, then the mayonnaise and the coffee and all the other stuff. You can't have too many things. You got to be the master of one. And so it's just a little too much for me as a franchise quarterback. As I'm saying that, as Red Lewis walked in here with a whole banana.
I mean, that's a red flag, Bucky. I got to be honest. That's a red flag. If I'm pounding a table for someone's pounding the table for Will Levis, I'd have to say, but yeah, what about? And then all those things that you just mentioned. They're red flags for me. They are.
I mean, it's just a little too much. It's a little too much. A whole brown banana. Like that's extra for me. That's almost like one of those weird acts at the circus or at the state fair. Hey, come see the guy eat the whole banana that's brown. That's Will Levis.
It's like The Greatest Showman meets the NFL draft. I agree. I totally agree with you. Thanks for the time, Bucky. We'll chat again soon. Terrific, as always.
Right,
thank you.
You guys have a good one. Hey, Broadman, next time I see you on the path, I'll make sure I acknowledge your presence,
buddy.
and I'll shake your little kid's hand.
Well, no, Bucky.
I won't be a weirdo, I promise.
No, exactly. Bucky, this is not on you.
No,
okay?
it's totally on
This
me.
is not on you. So, Brockman, before you say hello to somebody on a bike path, take your hood off, take your glasses off.
I know, it happened so fast.
Come on, that's a you problem. That's not a his problem.
Quick twitch.
That's a YP.
Happened too fast.
Right. It's not you, Bucky. Don't apologize for anything. You be you. You keep being you. You're great being you. Don't worry. Okay.
You guys are great.
You go right back at you. That's Bucky Brooks, everybody. Brockman, you're the one who's going to modify your behavior.
I totally understand. It was totally on me. That's totally a hand-up situation.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.